Hello and welcome everyone to 21 Days of Happy. I'm super excited today. We have the author Dave Runyon of the book, The Art of Neighboring, Building Genuine Relationships Right Outside Your Door. And I think this is a great book. I talk about this book all the time because I think it's so relevant now to where we are. Just so many people have been quarantined and isolated with this whole COVID-19 situation. So it's just great to have you today, Dave. Thank you for joining us. So why don't you just tell us, before we get going, I have a ton of questions
Yeah.
to ask you, but why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? And yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, Kelvin, I appreciate the invite. It's great to be here with you. My name is Dave. I spend my time here in a suburb right next to Denver, Colorado. I'm about 15 minutes outside the urban core.
Okay.
And I run a nonprofit. And we help faith and government and business leaders work together around issues with the poor.
Right.
And so I had served previously as a pastor for 10 years. And I just fell in love with this idea of bringing faith communities together and helping them kind of think, what would it look like if we were on the same team?
Yeah.
How could we actually work together and to serve our city together?
Right. No, that's great. To be honest, I went to Fuller Seminary here in California, Pasadena, California, and one of the professors recommended your book, and I'm like, man, like your book to me is so life changing because when I was a kid, I grew up in the South. We all knew our neighbors, right? Yeah, everybody knew each other. We hung out. We went to each other's house. But that's just so not the case.
Yeah,
That's just so not the case now, right? So,
that's right.
yeah, I don't know any of my neighbors. I know maybe two of my neighbors. It's crazy. So, what really inspired you to write this book? What was the impetus behind it?
Yeah, well, I was in the same boat as you, Kelvin. I was a pastor. I was just kind of cruising along. I was busy and filled up my life with all kinds of different things. I was serving on the board of 3 different nonprofits. I was trying to, run a church and help people figure out life with their
Yeah,
kids and with
sure.
their spouses and all the different stuff that you do when you're doing that. And then as we started to gather together other churches and try to figure out what's the smartest thing that we could do together in our city, we started to invite in different city leaders. So we would bring in the city manager, and about 10 years ago, we'd bring in the mayor, and we would just say, hey, tell us your story a little bit. We wanted to get to know
Yeah,
these leaders and
right,
how they ended up in our city. And
right,
then we would always ask them, where do you feel stuck? What if you were going to take all of the people that come to all of our churches and mobilize us around one thing, what should we do? And we had a mayor that told us, he said, if you guys want to have the biggest impact in our city, you should start a neighboring movement. And then he was like going to go on and list off a bunch of other things, and we're like, whoa, go back to that thing about neighboring. He said,
right,
yeah, what we know at the city level is that the closer people know each other based on proximity, the less weight there is on all of the systems that we're trying to provide and the programs we're trying to provide for people in need. And then he said this beautiful line. He said, what we're learning at the city is that relationships always trump programs. And now we're sitting there as a bunch of pastors in that room, and we're listening to our mayor tell a bunch of church people, hey, you know what you guys should do? You should do the Bible. Like do the most basic thing that the Bible says to do. And it
That's
was
so
an
funny.
incredibly convicting moment for me personally, because I realized I had done the love your neighbor thing as I chose to do. And I had filled up my life with so many different things that I didn't have time. I wasn't being very intentional with my actual neighbors. And that moment, Kelvin, just put me on this
Mm,
path to discovery of going, what if I just drew a circle around the place God's put me and begin to work out from there? What if I started to get to know some of these people who live right around me who think totally differently about the world than I do? I mean, that's and for me at that time as a pastor, I was getting burned out around because I was just around a bunch of like Christians all the time.
right.
That's not good for anybody. So and so I was desiring relationships with people who were different than me. And when you build proximity based relationships, that's what you get. And I just think I look at where our world is and our culture is right now, and how polarized people are, and how tribal things tend to get, very few people have deep friendships with people that think about politics, about the economy, about the world differently than them. You know, we tend to drift into these relationships where people think the same way that we do.
Yeah.
And that's how we end up so polarized. And so I think the secret sauce and the answer to a lot of what is ailing our culture right now could happen in the neighborhood. It could happen when we start to walk across the street, when we start to learn people's names and just take the next small step with the people that are right around us.
Yeah, that's great. Now, when you started the program in your community, can you tell me a little bit about that? Right?
Yeah.
Like in the impact. Maybe you have some stories of impact it had on people. Can you see the difference before and after?
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you this, what we did was not rocket science. I mean, it
Right.
was simple stuff. We didn't ask people to go and love their neighbors. That's like crazy, Jesus stuff. We were like, hey, would you just make a commitment to learn and retain and use your neighbors' names? And that was key. We just said, just do something small. And we asked people to commit to that. And then we gave them here's a little tic-tac-toe board looking thing.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's
That
cool.
little tic-tac-toe board, that's a refrigerator magnet right there.
Okay.
That little tic-tac-toe board was the key to everything we did, because we just said, would you put this on your fridge
Okay.
and use this as a tool to start writing down all of your neighbors' names and to put it in a place that's visible. And so
Oh, very.
that's all we did. All we did was say, would you learn and remember and use your neighbors' names? And now it's a Trojan horse to get people to do all kinds of other stuff, because
Yeah.
once you
Right.
learn somebody's name, once you take that first step, a lot of times organically other things will start to happen with some of your neighbors. And so we just kept sticking to that. That was all we did in our community. And then we encouraged people to throw good block parties. We
Yeah.
thought, like, hey, we should be a part of some of the best parties in town. So we did those two things. And we had about, I don't know, 20 or so different faith communities that all did this together at the same time. And it
Yeah.
gave us some momentum and some traction. And it was incredible. We started to see this movement of block parties happening all across our city. We started to see the number of calls to code enforcement started to go down,
Are
because
you
people stopped,
serious? Man.
they stopped picking up the phone and just, unfortunately, every time somebody's like grumpy at their neighbor, their first response a lot of times is pick up the phone and call the city. And when people started to get to know each other, they actually started talking to each other, checking in on each other. And it didn't eliminate all the calls to code enforcement right away. But the number started to drop because people started to really have relationship, and relationships what it's all about. Relationship allows you to go and to engage with somebody and to check in on them when you see that they haven't mowed their lawn for 4 weeks and they normally do,
Yeah.
or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
whatever it may be.
Right. Yeah. No, that's so powerful. I remember I remember one time my wife I was gone from our apartment or whatever, and my wife had got locked out of the house. So she went to our neighbor's apartment and was like, hey, I don't know, I don't know, can you call maybe she locked her phone in as well. Can
Right.
you call my husband or whatever with the phone? And so our neighbor let her use the phone, but our neighbor made her stand outside until I came. And I'm
That's
like,
weird.
and that
That's
was
pretty
like,
weird.
and so she stood outside for about 2 hours. And I'm like, man, is this where our world is? So I guess my question to you is like, why don't we neighbor, right? Why don't we, what you're saying is not rocket science. Why don't we neighbor?
I think one of the reasons is fear, and I don't know what happened in that situation with your wife, but
Yeah.
I think something happens when you can just turn on the TV every day and just
Yeah.
see 24-hour news cycle of
Right.
really hard stories to watch.
Yeah.
It does something to us. We start making assumptions about people that may or may not be true. And here's the hard thing. There are some really broken, people out there that, there's some dark stuff that happens in our neighborhoods. But like the guy moves down the street from me and he's like single and he's shy and, he's like in his 40s. And all of a sudden, like, if I'm not careful, I'll start making assumptions about him just because he hasn't engaged with me the same way that I want him to. And so, you start going, well, I wonder what that guy's problem is. And what's his story? What's he done in his past? All these crazy things, instead of actually just taking a step and leaning in and getting to know them. And so I think fear is a big reason that we experience, you know, some of those obstacles with neighboring. The other one is just time. We live at a pace that is insane. And most of us know it. Most of us are tired of it. But we live at a pace where our world is just jammed in with everything, you know, in our schedule is just like chock full, and we leave work and we don't actually leave work. So like people don't spend time out in their front yards like they used to. They're not as available.
Yeah, no.
They're not as interruptible. And so I think a lot of that's been driven by technology, but you know, those are the two things. Fear and time are the two reasons why I think that we've kind of lost the art of neighboring.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So with the whole COVID-19, and I know some states are still on lockdown, some states aren't, or whatever the case may be, but I live in LA, everyone's wearing masks and gloves.
Yeah,
and
same here. I'm
so,
same here in Denver.
so if my neighbor is coming down the block, I'm like cross I'm basically crossing the street, right? Because they may have the cooties or whatever.
That's right.
Right.
That's exactly. Well, let me speak to that, and I'm gonna try to talk you out of that, Kelvin. So
Okay.
I think this is a great moment for us to engage with our neighbors, because people are missing face-to-face interaction at school or at church or at work. And everywhere I go, people are saying, I'm seeing more neighbors than ever, because people are just dying to get out and to be walking around. So we're all seeing more and more people. This is a moment for us to be catalysts in our neighborhoods. This is a moment for us to lean towards our neighbors and to say, hey, listen, how's it going? Or, hey, I've seen you out walking a lot. I actually know that we've met 3 times, but I forgot your name. You know, that's like a little thing that makes a huge difference on the back end.
Right.
Or, hey, maybe it's somebody you know, and just stopping and saying, and you can do this from 6 feet away.
Yeah,
you can do this for, you know, safely, to just look at somebody and go, hey, how's all of this stuff impacting your work?
Yeah.
What's it been like trying to do the schooling stuff with your kids at home?
Right.
Hey, do you have any parents that you're worried about? These are like real simple things, but these are actually, those are things of depth that we normally, it's harder to get to. But right now, it's all there for the taking. And so I think with this moment we're living in, and we're hearing stories all over the country of people that are doing this, they're saying, you know, hey, I'm just grabbing my own little lawn chair, and I'm grabbing my own drink, and I'm going down, and we've got 5 of us that are just sitting 6 feet apart, 10 feet apart from each other, and just talking in the neighborhood. Right. You know, I've been doing that with my neighbors, and I'm like an extrovert, man. This COVID-19 stuff is killing me. And so it's been so life-giving to go down and to engage with some of my neighbors in that way. My wife's been doing these Zoom calls where they're doing like Zoom happy hour, and they just hop on the Zoom call. And they're either doing like a group FaceTime chat or an actual Zoom, and they're just catching up with how are you doing? How are your kids doing? What are you frustrated about? You know, they're just having a place to vent. Yeah. One of my other neighbors was he's like, hey, I want to do a trivia night. So we're working on setting up a trivia night over Zoom. Right. And so I think a lot of this stuff is really important if we're going to combat the social isolation and the loneliness that these stay-at-home orders have a risk. There's all kinds of research out there right now. Absolutely. There's all kinds of data. The danger of loneliness and isolation is real right now.
It's very real.
The people that first started talking about social distancing are now trying to rephrase it, because they realize it has some negative connotations. They're now trying to call it physical distancing. They don't want people to social distance. They want people to physically distance. Yeah. And so I think I just talk to anybody out there listening to this, like, this is a great moment to actually start to take some steps towards building the kind of neighborhood that a lot of us dream about having, a neighborhood where you're not just driving in waving to people, but a neighborhood where you drive in and you actually know the people that you live around. And I think it's all there for the taking right now. Yeah, no, that's great. You know, you've talked me into it. I'm gonna take some baby steps in my neighborhood. So that's right. Yeah, so it's so needed. It seems like really the solutions are in thinking locally, right? Just yes, I can't solve all the world's problems or our country's problems, but I can participate locally and in my community or neighborhood. Yes, for sure. Think small. Take the next small step. That's what the best thing that we do. It's the old. Did you ever? I don't know how old you are, but did you ever see What About Bob? Yeah, that movie. The baby. Yeah, the baby steps book and What About Bob. It's all about baby steps. And what I've learned is those small steps, a lot of times taking that first step of just learning names is like stepping onto a moving sidewalk. You take that first step on, and then all of a sudden it starts taking you down the road.
Yeah.
And that's only with some of your neighbors. Some of my neighbors don't want to be my friends. Some of my neighbors are busy. They just want to get home, get
like
their garage.
Right. They're like, I don't want to be bothered. Thank you, but no thank you.
That's right. And they just want to get their garage door up, get their garage door down, and get on, and go into their house and detox from their day, and then wake up and do it all over again.
Yeah.
I have a lot of grace for that, because I feel like that's probably how some of my neighbors experience me for a lot of my life. But what I've learned is some of my neighbors are dying for connection. And if I'll just lean towards them a little bit, if I'll just think that they're important enough to remember their name, all of a sudden that starts opening the door towards us just kind of like starting to have organic relationship and friendship that happens as a result of where we live.
Right. I was doing another interview earlier today, and the interviewee was talking about how we have there are a lot of senior citizens in her neighborhood. So she checks on them and goes and buys them groceries and things of that nature. And I'm like, man, yeah, I don't even know how many senior citizens are in my neighborhood, but I'm sure people could use my help.
Yeah. I think the at-risk stuff is huge. Like, if you know of older people, and there's so much fear. So I've learned this in my own experience here in my community, is that the best thing you can do is to just reach out. If you have a phone number, if you have an email, even if you have to like knock on the door and take a few steps back, just reach out and just offer to help. There's so much anxiety, especially for our older population. So I just learned to say, listen, I just want you to know, if you don't want to go out, I'm willing to go. I'm healthy right now. I will wash my hands before and after. I will wipe down everything that I deliver to your patio. And even if they don't take you up on it, even if they don't take you, it's a big step forward in your neighborhood, because they at least know there's somebody there I could reach out to if I did need help.
Right. I'm thinking there's this reality show called Neighbor Wars, right? Where neighbors are at odds with each other.
Yeah.
But I got to ask this question. Have you ever seen like neighboring go wrong, right?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, I mean, because, I'm just going to that fear, right? Where you try to help or introduce yourself and they turn out they're crazy, whatever, right?
All the time. Or you start meeting the neighbor and they're like super needy, and then you have to start learning how to like draw boundaries, or something small happens and they like flip out on you.
Right.
That's going to happen.
Yeah.
That is going to. This is messy. This is, for me, this is like having kids, Kelvin.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have kids?
Yeah, I have 2 kids, 3
I don't know,
2-year-old, 1-year-old, and yeah.
All right, you're early, man. So, but man, I'll just tell you this. I don't know what your kids are like. My kids are hard. Okay, my kids are hard, but I don't ever want to go back.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about neighboring. Is that like, it's messy and it's beautiful and it's powerful. And I can't imagine going back to the way I used to live when I was just treating my house like as a refuge.
Yeah.
And I think what I've learned is, as people lean into their own neighborhoods, they feel the same way. They always come back and share these stories. And sometimes my relationships with my neighbors, it isn't about me serving them or figuring out, how I can help the elderly. It's about me being changed. It's about me being in situations that actually change me and make me a better person. And so I'm drinking all the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
I love it. I believe in it. I think this is the best way to live, on a number of levels.
Yeah, that's great. I'm excited. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna take some baby steps, like moving forward. So, hey, where can I find your book, or do you have a community, Facebook community, a website? How can I get more information, or if I want to,
so
my neighborhood.
The book's anywhere. If you just want to buy a book, go to Amazon. That's the easiest place. If you want to buy 10 books and do it as a small group study, or there's just a bunch of free resources. Like, if you want to get that little refrigerator magnet, you can go to artofneighboring.com.
Okay.
Most everything on there is just free, open source, that you can just grab and download and use it yourself. And so, but artofneighboring.com is the best place to go if you want to get some tools and to start taking the next steps in your own neighborhood.
Okay. Great.
Also, Kelvin, on the artofneighboring.com resource page, there's a COVID-19 neighborhood toolkit, and it's got a bunch of super practical really, really practical ideas that people can do in their own neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah. I really think that neighboring is the key. Last question I want to ask you, since this is 21 days of happy, how do you think
Yeah.
neighboring ties into happiness?
Oh man. I'll just tell you what, Kelvin, if you told me right now I could move into a house that's worth twice as much as this one, but that the neighbors won't be connected, I wouldn't take it. I mean, there is something about living in a place where you know the people that live around you that raises your entire level in well-being and happiness. Malcolm Gladwell talks about this in the book Outliers. In the intro to Outliers, he talks about this community where people were living significantly longer than others, and researchers could not figure out, was it their diet, was it all, they went through all these different things of like, why are these people living so much longer? And what they zeroed down in on is this place is uncommonly connected.
Wow.
And he just talks about the fact that like there's something that happens when you know the people you live around. It raises your quality of life, it raises your happiness quotient in huge, huge ways. And if you lived in a place where people knew each other, or if you experienced that in your past, and then you have lived in a place where people don't, you know it. You know the difference.
Dude,
You know what a difference it makes.
kill it.
So I think this is the key. You want to experience happiness, start to become more connected with the people that live right around you. It's one of the best things you can do.
Right. Yeah, that's great. This ties right into that. There's a Harvard study. I think they did a 75-year study on a population, but throughout their life. But what they found is like the people who had the healthiest relationships were the ones who were the most happy and yeah, just
Yep,
physically healthy as well. So
that's
yeah,
right. so
relationships and connection are so important. Well, Dave, thank you so much for like joining us today. I
It's been
appreciate
fun, Kelvin.
writing a book. I think this is the time, right, for like the art of neighboring, building genuine relationships right outside your door. So you impacted me, and yeah, I hope people will pick up the book and start really practicing some of this in their own neighborhoods.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, it's been fun. It's been fun to connect with you, Kelvin. I love what you're up to.
yeah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So take care.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right, be safe. Bye bye.